Walk into a Porsche showroom today, and when speccing a 911, you'll get a choice of two gearboxes, the manual, stick shift, or PDK. Prior to PDK, there was Tiptronic. Not a lot of people know, though, that prior to Tiptronic, there was another gearbox. There was semi-automatic at least, and it was arguably more engaging to drive than the two that followed. The naming of it is quite obvious. It's an automatic transmission, but Porsche wanted to jazz things up, sport things up, and they claimed that it was for sporty drivers, hence the name Sportomatic. It was introduced way back in 1967, so almost as soon as the 911 was released, Porsche was attempting to offer a semi-automatic option. The gearbox was actually aimed at the United States audience, where automatic cars always have reigned supreme, really. The irony is actually more ended up being sold over the years in Europe. Today, a 911 or a Porsche with Sportomatic is definitely a rare thing, and they also seem to form a bit of a quirky footnote in Porsche history. So what is a Sportomatic, and how does a Sportomatic 911 drive? Well, we're going to find out today with this beautiful Minerva Blue example supplied by Paragon. Super low mileage, amazing condition, and really lovely tartan interior, as you can see. So it goes without saying, this is a pretty good example to find out just what Sportomatic is all about. Introduced then in 1967, it was actually on the 911S of the time, but it was latterly available in the 911T as well. In typical Porsche fashion, the ingenuity of the product is really in its simplicity. It is quite literally a Porsche 905 gearbox, basically with a torque converter. It means the car does away with the conventional clutch and therefore a third pedal, but it does maintain the H pattern stick shift. Okay, it will pick up pace pretty quickly still. Oh yeah, that's a zippy engine. We all know how torquey the Carrera 3 litre is. I've covered it earlier this year, in fact. Car that was only available for two model years, 76 and 77. It was the predecessor to the popular SC. A torquey engine, really well suited to this gearbox. Definitely likes to rev, as all the best 911s do. It was 4-speed originally, but latterly Sportomatic switched to 3-speed, as here, before the technology was discontinued in 1980, and that really was because uptake was slow. And Porsche, in fact, wouldn't revisit the idea of an automatic transmission for another 18 years with the advent of the 964. And an interesting fact for you, the gearbox uses the oil from the engine, which is why Sportomatic 911s need another 2.3 litres of oil compared to manual equivalents. And I hope that wins you a pub quiz one day. So how is it to drive? Well, very interesting. I'm probably having to think about my driving inputs more so in this Sportomatic than I would in a manual. It's possibly only because I'm still getting used to the gearbox. I have actually driven one of these before, but it was many moons ago. There are several reasons as to why I'm having to think about my inputs, and you might think that's quite bizarre considering this is a semi-automatic gearbox. The first reason is you can only touch the H-patterned gear lever when you are actually going to change gear. And the reason is there's a micro switch in the shifter which is activated with only the slightest depression of the shifter. And the other reason is if you forget that you're driving a Sportomatic and you go to depress a clutch pedal that isn't there, you will just end up pressing a brake pedal very hard and your schnoz will definitely touch glass. And with that in mind, let's pull over and look at that shifter in a bit more detail. So as you can see, and hopefully you've seen already in the video, there is no clutch pedal. We've just got the two pedals, the floor mounted brake and the organ pedal for the accelerator. Then we've got what looks like, at face value, the traditional shifter from like a 915 manual gearbox. And while it does have a H pattern layout, it is an automatic gearbox. So what do the individual gears on the top of this shifter say and do? Beginning top left, we've got P for park. Straight down from there, we've got R for reverse. Dead ahead of neutral, you've got L. Now, L really means low. And believe it or not, it's for starting this car on inclines. It's a bit like the G gear, Galanda, or terrain, in the 959. Otherwise, straight down from L is D. And that is the gear that really Porsche encourages you to drive off from all the time. In the 4-speed Sportomatic, the first Sportomatic, you'd then have D3 and D4. Where D2 is, nobody knows. In the later 3-geared Sportomatic, as we've got here in this lovely Minerva blue car, you've just got D3. That is like an overdrive gear, really. So otherwise, it's snick it into D and pretty much leave it. That pretty much explains the theory on how to use Sportomatic. Let's test it out and see how you actually use Sportomatic gearbox practically in the real world. Right, before I go anywhere, let's pop you up. Better get this right first time. So we're going to show you what happens with a Sportomatic. So it's in neutral. Start the engine. I do need to point out this car's not been prepped yet. It's about to go through Paragon's prep. So let's take the handbrake off, pop it in D. And that's it, we're off. Nice and easy, pickup is really smooth. And then just to kind of prove the point, I guess, let's just stop here and I'm going to go into reverse, which is basically over, and then look, straight back in and then stop. So that's reverse, and then I want D again, into D, away we go. Simple as that. What's interesting is you can use, and this is for the 4-speed and the 3-speed, you can use any gear to set off. And it gets more interesting because top speed is not recognised in the top gear, the overdrive gear, which here is D3. It means therefore in a Sportomatic you can go from standing still to outright top speed in the same gear without having to change cogs at all. So here we go, here's a good example of that overdrive. I'm lumping along in 60, revs are at about 4 grand, 7 the red line, just feels a little bit high. So change up, and it drops to just over 2 grand, sitting at 60, and it's a little bit quieter. It still bumbles along quite nicely. So look, Sportomatics have always been rare. Manual was always the de facto option really for many enthusiasts, and over time the Sportomatic gearbox has only become rarer because in the ensuing years subsequent owners have swapped out the Sportomatic gearbox in favour of that 915 manual. Does a Sportomatic gearbox devalue a classic 911 today? With a classic Porsche, really it's more about condition. So I would say a real exemplary example of Sportomatic, like this car from Paragon, is going to be worth more than a manual equivalent in shoddy condition, though I can totally appreciate it won't appeal to everybody. There is absolutely no hardship whatsoever to driving this car, and yet it's not boring either. It's often the accusations levied at automatic gearboxes and transmissions as they take away so much. Well, not here actually. It's a really nice balance or mixture of engagement but also simplicity, particularly against the backdrop of 915s, so the manual equivalents for cars of this age. As I've mentioned previously, there are plenty of bad condition 915s out there, and it completely spoils the classic Porsche driving experience. Well, with the Sportomatic, you don't have that. So that really is the top level of Sportomatic. As I said at the top of the video, a real cool and quirky footnote to Porsche history, not very well known at all in this day and age, and far less seen. I think that's a great shame. If you've got one of these, don't swap it out for a manual. Absolutely rock the Sporto. It goes without saying, thanks to the guys from Paragon for supplying just the most exquisite car. I mean, look at it. It's absolutely achingly beautiful. It's incredibly low mileage. It's available now for purchase. It comes with a 1-year comprehensive warranty. which is so valuable for classic motoring, particularly in a car that's 50 years old nigh on. So thanks to the guys, as always, thanks to you for watching, it means a lot, and we'll see you again soon in another episode of 9wax TV.